The bridge itself was thickly shaded by overhanging trees which cast a gloom about it even in daytime, occasioning a fearful darkness of the night that was one favorite haunt of headless horsemen, place where horsemen frequently encountered. Tale was told of Bold Brover, a host heretical believer ghosts, how he met the horseman returning from his foray to Sleepy Hollow, and was obliged to get up behind him, how they galloped over bush and brake, over hill and swamp, until they reached the bridge. When the horseman suddenly turned into a skeleton, he threw the old brower into the brook, sprang away over the treetops with a clap of thunder. This story was immediately watched by Trey's marvelous adventure of Broom Bones, who made light of the gloomy Hessian as an errant jockey. He affirmed that on returning one night to the neighboring village of Sing, he had been overtaken by a midnight trooper. He had offered to send him a bowl of punch and should have won it too, for there they will beat the goblin horse hollow. But just as they came into the charge bridge, the Hessian bolted and vanished in flash of fire. All these tales told in the drowsy undertone which men talk in the dark sank deep in the mind of Ichabod. The revel now gradually broke up. Ichabod lingered behind to have tete-a-tete with Harris, fully convinced that he was now on the high road to success. Something, however, I fear me, have gone wrong. He sallied forth after no grey interval, with an air quite desolate and chopfallen. It was the very witching time of night that Ichabod, heavy-hearted and crestfallen, pursued travelled homeward. The hour was dismal himself. In the dead hush of midnight he could even hear the barking of the watchdog, but it was so vague and faint as only to give an idea of his distance from this faithful companionman. No signs of life occurred near him. All stories of ghosts and goblins that he heard in the afternoon now came crowding upon his recollection. The night grew darker and darker. He had never felt so lonely and dismal. He was moreover approaching the very place where many of scenes of ghost stories has been laid. The center of the road stood an enormous tulip tree, which towered like a giant above all other trees of the neighborhood and formed a kind of landmark. His limbs were gnarled as fantastic, large enough to form trunks for ordinary trees, twisting down almost to the earth, rising again into the air. As Ichabod approached this fearful tree, he began to whistle. His whistle was answered. It was but a blast sweeping sharply through the dry branches. As he approached a little nearer, he thought he saw something white hanging in the midst of the tree. He ceased whistling on the looking more narrowly, perceived that it was a place where the tree had been struck by lightning, and the white wood laid bare. Suddenly he heard a groan, and his knees smote against the saddle. It was but the robbing one huge bough upon another day were swayed about by the breeze. He passed the tree in safety, but new perils lay before him. About 200 yards from the tree, a small brook crossed the road and ran into a marshy, thickly wooded glen. A few rock logs laid side by side served for the bridge over the stream, to pass the bridge was the severest trial. This has ever since been considered a haunted stream, and fearful are the feelings of the schoolboy who has to pass it alone after dark. As he approached the stream, his heart began to thump. He gave his horse half a score of kicks in the ribs, attempted to dash briskly across the bridge, bestowed both whip and heel upon the starveling ribs of old Gunpowder, who dashed forward, snuffling and snorting, but came to stand just by the bridge. With a suddenness he had nearly sent his rider sprawling over his head. Just at this moment, Plashy Tramp, side of the bridge, caught the sensitive ear of Ichabod. In the shadow of the grove, on the margin of the brook, he beheld something huge, mishap and black towering. It stirred not, but seemed gathered up in the gloom, like some gigantic monster ready to spring upon the traveler. The hair of the affrighted pedagogue rose upon his head with terror. What was to be done? To turn and fly now was now too late. Besides, what chance was there escaping ghost or goblin, if such it was, which could ride upon the wings of the wind, summoning up there for a show of courage? He demanded in reconnaissance. Who are you? He received no reply. He repeated his demand in a still more agitated voice. There was no answer. Just then, a shadowy object of alarm of itself in motion, and with a scramble at the bound stood at once middle of the road. He appeared to be horseman of large dimensions, and mounted a black horse of powerful frame. He kept aloft on the one side of the road, jogging along on the blind side of old Gunpowder, who had now got over his fright and waywardness. Ichabod, who had no relish for this strange midnight companion, and begged out himself of the adventure of Brombones with galloping Hessian, now quickened his steed. The stranger, however, quickened his horse to an equal pace. Ichabod pulled up and fell into a walk, thinking to lag behind, and another did the same. His heart began to sink within him. There was something the moody and dogged silence of the pertinacious companion that was mysterious and appalling. It was fearfully accounted for. Mounting and a rising ground which brought the figure of his fellow traveler leap against the sky, gigantic in height, muffled in a cloak. Ichabod was horror-struck on perceiving that he was headless. But his horror was still more increased on observing that he head which should have rested on the shoulders he carried before on the pommel of the saddle. His terror rose to desperation. He rained shower of kicks and blows upon Gunpowder, hoping by sudden movement to give his companion the slip, but the space started full jump with him away. Then they dashed through thick and thin, stones flying, sparks flashing at every bound. Ichabod's flimsy garments fluttered in the air as he stretched his long, lank body way over his horse's head, in the eagerness of his flight. They had now reached the road that turns to Sleepy Hollow, but Gunpowder was soon possessed with a demon, made an opposite turn, plunged headlong downhill to the left. This road leads through a sandy hollow shaded by trees for about a quarter of a mile. It crosses the bridge famous in Goblin Story, and just beyond swirls the green knoll which stands in the whitewashed church. As yet the panic of the steed has given his unskillful rider an apparent advantage in the chase, but just as he had got halfway through the hollow, the girths of the sail gave away, and he fell slipping from under him, and had just time to save himself by clasping old gunpowder around the neck. The sail fell to the earth, and he had it trampled underfoot by his pursuer. An opening in the trees now chilled with